Imagine a boy luffed at, mocked, spat on. A boy with no father, no home, no name worth keeping. Chased from village to village with his mother. Beaten by other children. Rejected by his own blood. Nup mentioned that some bug growing up to commend 50,000 warpas, conquering more than 100 kingdoms, building the mightiest military empire southern Africa had ever seen. And then imagine him losing his mind and tearing it all down with his own hands. Thus is not a simple story of triumph. This is the story of a man who was both the greatest thing that ever happened to the Zulu and the worst. This is Shaka Zulu, and you will not believe he was real. In the year 1787, in a small, insignificant Zulu clan in what is now KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, a child was born who was not supposed to exist. His father, Sunzingakana, was a minor chief of the Zulu at the time, one of the smallest, most irrelevant clans among more than 800 Nguni peoples. His mother, Nandi, was the daughter of a Lenjani chief. This problem was simple and devastating. They were from the same clan, and under Zulu law, that was forbidden. When Nandi became pregnant, the elders refused to believe it. Zula elder, it is not a child. It is Shaka, an intestinal beetle. The woman is sick, not pregnant. When the baby arrived, proving the elders spectacularly wrong, they named him after that insult. Shaka, the intestinal beetle, a name meant to humiliate from the first breath. When Shaka was 6, his father banished him and his mother. They went first to the Lenjani Nandi's people, who received them with contempt. The children in the village mocked Shaka constantly, teasing him about the fact that he had no father willing to claim him. There goes the fatherless one, the beetle boy. Your father doesn't want you, Shaka. Remember my face. In 1802, famine struck the Lenjani region. Even his mother's people could no longer feed them. Nandi and Shaka were driven out again, this time finding refuge with the Umthuthwa clan, the most powerful group in the region, ruled by the great chief Dungaswa. It was here, in the lands of the Umthuthwa, that the beetle boy began to transform into something else entirely. Vajals, warriors training. Dust, sweat, discipline. Young Shaka, tall, physically imposing, dominating every drill. Shaka grew into a physical specimen that made other men uneasy. Tall, powerful, and burning with something that had no name, a cold, relentless drive that set him apart from every other soldier in Dungaswa's army. He became one of the chief's best fighters, then his best general. But what made Shaka extraordinary wasn't just his body. It was his mind. He looked at the way his people made war and he saw waste. He saw inefficiency. He saw men throwing spears from a safe distance and then retreating when things got difficult. He saw a way of fighting designed not to win, but not to lose too badly. You are practicing how to run away elegantly. That is not warfare. That is theater. Waruk. These are the weapons of our fathers, Shaka, our fathers lost. Often, the weapons change tonight. He abolished the long-throwing spear, the assegai, and replaced it with a shorter, heavier stabbing spear called the uklua. You couldn't throw it from safety. You had to get close enough to look a man in the eyes. He banned sandals. His warriors would fight barefoot, their feet hardened by miles of training across every terrain, gravel, thorn, rock. He recruited young boys as carriers so his warriors could move faster, further, longer than any army in the region. And then he invented the tactic that would become his signature, the bull's horn. His armies would spread into a wide arc, the chest engaging the enemy head-on, the two horns sweeping around the flanks to encircle, the loins held in reserve to finish what remained. It was not just a military tactic. It was a philosophy, total war, no retreat, no mercy. No prisoners who would come back tomorrow. In 1816, Shaka's father, the man who had cast him out as a child, died. His half-brother Sugyajana inherited the Zulu throne. It lasted perhaps 2 weeks. With Dungaswa's blessing and military support, Shaka returned to the Zulu for the first time since he was 6 years old, not as a beggar, not as an exile, but at the head of an army. Sugyajana was killed. Shaka took the throne. And the very first thing he did was go looking for the men who had bullied him as a child. I said, remember my face. You remember now. These men who had tormented him as a child were impaled on sharp stakes, not out of pure cruelty, or not only that, but as a message that the world had changed, that the beetle boy was now the eagle, and that the eagle remembered everything. He then reorganized the Zulu society from the ground up. Young men were sorted into age-based regiments, the Umabatha, and housed in military barracks called Umakunda. They were forbidden to marry until Shaka gave permission, forbidden to own land. They belonged entirely to the nation. Within a year of taking power, Shaka had turned a clan of fewer than 1,500 people into the nucleus of a military machine. And then he turned it loose on the world. Villages burning. Cattle herds streaming across the veldt. Maps showing Zulu territory expanding. One by one, the kingdoms around the Zulu fell. Some were destroyed. Some were absorbed. Some fled, and their fleeing set off a chain reaction of displacement and warfare that swept across southern Africa like a wave. Historians call it the Umfucken, the crushing. Within a decade, Shaka had conquered an empire of over 80,000 square miles. He commanded an army of more than 50,000 warriors, the finest military force the continent south of the Sahara had ever produced. The population of the Zulu kingdom swelled to 250,000. Hus grut ruved, Zwud of Undwindwa, Hahud Mutterud Shukas Munta Dungaswa, faced him twice on the battlefield. The first time at Jukuckli Hill, Shaka was outnumbered 3-1, and still won, using terrain and tactics to neutralize the Undwindwa's numerical advantage. The second time, at the Battle of Amuchlata's River in 1820, he destroyed the Undwindwa so thoroughly they ceased to exist as a political entity. There is no regrouping. There is no coming back from this. Run, just run. Even European explorers who visited Shaka's court were astonished. One trader, Henry Francis Funn, described a man who was brilliant, charming in private, ruthless in public, a man who demonstrated European firearms and dismissed them. Interesting toy. But in the time it takes your man to reload, my warriors have already crossed the field and put a spear in him. I will keep my spears. Ha was, in many ways, a man of extraordinary vision. He established trade routes. He built a centralized government. He sent ambassadors. He was the first Zulu king to deal directly with European powers as an equal. His face, the face of a man losing grip. A messenger approaches, head bowed. In October of 1827, Shaka's mother, Nandi, the woman who had carried him through exile and humiliation, who had believed in him when the entire world told her he was worthless, died. And something in Shaka died with her. He ordered a period of national mourning. That was expected. What was not expected was what came next. 7,000 people were executed, accused of not grieving sufficiently. For a full year, no crops were planted. No milk was used. No women could fall pregnant. Those who were already pregnant were killed along with their husbands. My king! The people are suffering. The warriors themselves are tired. This morning, it is destroying the very kingdom your mother. Shaka, she is gone. Everything that mattered is gone. Let the world mourn as I mourn. My king, if there is no harvest, Shaka, I said, let the world mourn. The armies were kept in constant campaigning, brutal, unending, even in winter. Warriors who had served for decades without being allowed to marry began to whisper. Chiefs who had bent the knee began to plot. And within Shaka's own inner circle, a conspiracy was forming. His half-brothers Dingaan and Amachlengana had been waiting. They had seen a man unravel. They saw a window. In September of 1828, while Shaka's main army was away on campaign, they made their move. Visuals, twilight, Shaka alone in the kraal, his guard reduced, footsteps in shadow, the glint of spears. The evening of September 22nd, 1828 was quiet. A delegation had come from a southern chief, and Shaka received them. He had sent most of his bodyguard away. He was perhaps careless or perhaps simply tired of caring. Dingaan and Amachlengana moved through the shadows with one other man, Mbopa, an Induna who had grievances of his own. Shaka heard them coming. Children of my father, what is this? What are you doing? You have made yourself our enemy, brother. You have made yourself the enemy of every Zulu alive. The spears fell. Shaka, the man who had never once been defeated on a battlefield, died in his own kraal at the hands of his brothers. He was 41 years old. He was buried in an unmarked grain pit. No monument, no ceremony. The brothers were afraid that even in death, the site of his grave might become a place of power. They were right to be afraid, because 300 years later we are still talking about him. Visuals, modern KwaZulu-Natal, a statue of Shaka, the ocean behind it, Zulu dancers, children, Shaka Zulu, Africa's Napoleon, the most controversial figure in Southern African history. Depending on who you ask, he was a visionary genius who united a fractured people into a nation, or a tyrant who killed hundreds of thousands and triggered a generation of regional suffering? The truth, as always, is both. He was both. He was a boy who suffered enormously and never forgave the world for it. He was a military genius without equal in the Africa of his time. He was a king who loved his mother so completely that losing her broke the architecture of his sanity. What he built survived him. The Zulu kingdom outlasted his assassination by more than 50 years. It took the full military might of the British Empire, including one of the most humiliating defeats ever suffered by European forces in Africa at the Battle of Isandlwana, to finally subdue what Shaka built. They never fully subdued the spirit of it. The Zulu people are still here, still proud, still in the deepest chambers of their cultural memory, whispering the praise name of the man who made them, you Shaka, the bull elephant, the one who shook the earth. Subscribe. Leave us the name of the next legend you want us to cover. We will find them. We will tell their story. Because Africa's history is not a footnote, it is the headline.